But I want to try to connect some dots here. We had a discussion earlier this week on the program about Hamilton's LRT project. We had Joe Mancinelli, of course, from LIUNA, who seems to be doing most of the legwork to try to get the federal and provincial governments to commit money to the LRT project. And he said on our program, of course, that he thought they were close to the finish line, was the phrase he uses. But they were looking for money from the federal government. Well, that's all well and good, except yesterday the federal government made a rather huge announcement about public transit and dedicating an awful lot of money to it for electric buses, not for LRT lines. This is the Minister, Catherine McKenna.
This means better public transit, cleaner air, quieter streets, and a planet safe for our kids and future generations.
Okay. How does that jive with a demand for money for, or a request, I guess, more specifically for money for LRT here in Hamilton? John Best is the publisher of the Bay Observer. He's been writing extensively about this for years now, because that's how long we've been talking about it. John, welcome back to the show. Good to have you with us today.
Well, thanks, Bill. Good to be with you.
I guess the obvious question here, John, is how does the request for LRT stack up against what seems to be the government's intention that electric is the future and they want electric buses?
Well, if you look at the announcement yesterday, it's $2.75 billion over 5 years, and that's for the entire country. So that works out to, what, 600-odd million a year for buses, for electric buses. And it appears that we're proposing to ask them to give Hamilton a loan, something in the area of 1.4. It's hard to know what the actual number is, but
that's
we're
ballpark,
asking McKenna or whoever at the federal level to top up our shortfall. Right now, the province has pledged $1 billion, and I've been speaking to some people at Queen's Park, and that billion is $1 billion. You hear people talking about it somehow stretching out to 1.3 billion, and maybe somebody will cover off our $40 million a year in interest costs. None of that is going to happen from the Ontario government because they're very clear. It's $1 billion, period. So if we're thinking that we can get $1.5 billion just for our own single project here in Hamilton, when they're spending roughly half that a year on a nationwide system, I'm not saying it can't happen, but the numbers really jump out at you, that's for sure.
What about the future? And I know that the advocates for LRT will say, well, that is the future. But the government's direction seems to be that they're looking at, like I say, this initiative. I agree. It's not very much money at all when you look at it on a grand scale, on the national scale. It's really to upgrade systems, but around transit systems right across the country. But is there something to read between the lines here that the government's saying, we're not looking at that kind of system, guys. We're looking at this?
Well, I think it's probably two ships passing in the night, frankly, Bill. I think Catherine McKenna, I've been following her announcements. She's been all over Canada really for the last 12 months, and she's gone into Edmonton, she's gone into Guelph, she's been in Oakville. Yesterday's announcement, she made it in Ottawa. She's been handing out money for electric buses for about a year now, and it's clear the government sees the value in electric buses. They feel that the technology is now robust enough that we're into rolling out. It's not a futuristic kind of thing anymore. And London, Ontario is looking at electrifying their entire fleet. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the technology they're talking about now, it's not simply sitting in the bus barn charging overnight. The other piece of the puzzle is a overhead charging system that typically, say in Hamilton, you'd have one at the end of how you come to the end of a bus route, and normally the bus is sitting there for 4 or 5 minutes, waiting to get back on schedule. It would be charging, and they have these rapid charging overhead units now that can top up the bus in about 5 minutes. So, they charge overnight as you would expect, and then they're able to do these top-ups all through the day right on the route. So it's being used right across North America, and obviously this government believes in it to invest that kind of money, $2.75 billion. They say, as part of the announcement yesterday, their goal, right now we have 300 electric buses in all of Canada, and their goal is to have it up to 5,000 electric buses. So that's a significant ramp up, and it's obviously a vote of confidence for that technology.
And if I recall, I can still remember the early shows we did about light rail transit when Hamilton Council got their heads around this and thought this is going to be great for our community. The technology for buses, and it existed in those days, but it certainly wasn't considered to be a viable alternative. The announcement the government's making here, and by the way, it's not just this government. I mean, other governments in Europe and other places have already done this. I mean, we're playing catch up when it comes to the electric buses. But it's obviously the technology is advanced to the point now where many governments are looking at this as the preferred option.
Yes, because it is, obviously it's completely pollution free, and a lot of the charging, excuse me, will take place at night when the demand on our power grid is low. So there's cheap surplus that's an off-peak charging time. So it's a clean technology, and it's now been proven long enough that it can, if you're rolling out electric buses in Edmonton, obviously there are climate issues. Somebody's worked around that to have the confidence to electrify a fleet in a really cold climate like Edmonton. So the government is clearly saying that this technology is here now. It's not futuristic. Hydrogen, I think, is still a little off in the future. That'll be another rollout, in the not too distant future. But this current system with the ability to now do this rapid charging, and I think that's really been the key to making this a more viable option, so that you don't have a bus trying to run all day on one charge now. It's getting topped up all through the day, and that really seems to be the game changer.
I know that the advocates of LRT are going to say, well, that's an electric system too, but it's and again, the opponents of it are saying, yeah, but it's old technology. It's electric. This electric bus concept that the federal government is now financing for all intents and purposes, they say is the future, not LRT. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen here. I mean, you've got two levels of government that are saying, yeah, that's a great idea, but nobody's put a check on the table yet. Well, to their credit, I guess the province has, but they've quite readily admitted that this is nowhere near enough. I mean, if all we had was the provincial money, I think, wouldn't you say we get an LRT from McMaster University to Dundurn Street, which is, hardly worth doing. I mean, are we really going to build a bridge over the 403 and everything like that for that? It just doesn't make sense. No. The federal government seems to be where the holdup is here.
Yes, there's no question, and I think you might find that one of the reasons this project was, one of the reasons the request went into the federal government was because prior to that, Catherine McKenna was going around saying, well, LRT seems like a great idea. It's shovel-ready. We're just waiting to hear from the province. So the province kind of threw the ball back into her court, and now we'll have to see if she is, in fact, able to come up with this extra money.
It will be interesting to watch over the next couple of days especially. John, as always, thanks for this. Great talking with you today.
My pleasure, Bill.